dear Ministers and Excellencies, dear State Secretary Barke, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a little bit today here as a substitute player, but whoever have seen yesterday Bayern Munich against Juventus Turin knows the importance of substitute players. So thank you very much at first for having me here, and thank you very much for the already inspiring speeches this morning that we had, and thanks a lot for having me here today. As a representative of a company that is truly, and in the original sense of the word, the backbone of the Energiewende in Germany. I was also joining COP21 in Paris for some discussions and exchanges for some days. First of all, I'm very happy with the strong movement forward and the strong signals from Paris. But I was surprised to see this year in Paris, the renewable energies were much more in the center of the debate as the sustainable and long-term oriented solution for combating the climate change. So let me share today some views and experiences on this development that we made in our energy transition towards a renewable and decarbonized world from a business perspective here in Germany. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to serve a company which has shown that in a country as highly industrialized as Germany, the transformation into a renewable-dominated world is possible, and that the challenges we had and still have indisputable to face are manageable. 50Hertz is a one German transmission system operator, as we already heard, covering roughly 1/3 of the country. With the German Energiewende, we are currently in the middle of the biggest industrial transformation since the reunification. What makes 50Hertz different from many others is the early and massive development of renewables, especially wind power, in our region. In our region, the northeast of Germany, so 1/3 of Germany, already last year, over 49% of the consumption was covered by intermittent renewables, meaning wind and solar power. To my knowledge, there is no other grid region in the world with a comparable share of volatile renewables. Of course, some countries like Norway with hydropower have a higher share there. And besides this enormous share of renewables, we have also a very high level of security of supply. On the high voltage level, our last outage has been more than 3 decades ago. And the interruption time on end consumer level in our region is below 15 minutes a year. This shows impressively that a high share of renewables can be combined with a high level of security of supply. Some people called the German energy transition a huge and uncertain experiment. Staying a little bit in this picture, our 50Hertz grid region and a bit also 50Hertz as a company are the laboratory for this experiment. We often hear from foreign visiting delegations that they're afraid of the effects of wind and PV in the system due to their volatility. We then reply they should just go for it, as the system and the involved parties will learn to adapt and to cope with the rising share of renewables step by step. In our development, we could identify 3 general phases, as I already pointed them out last year here in this conference. The first phase, when renewables were a niche product, 5 to 10% maybe, we learned to live with them, we learned how to develop forecast systems and these kind of things. But in this phase, errors had no impact on the overall system, so in practice it was a learning phase. We could ignore the renewables a bit. In the second phase, 10 to 40%, renewables became a major player, a major source in the system. What was important during this time? The legislation around the renewables needed to change. For example, curtailment had to be allowed, and we had to train how to use it. Forecasting methods had to get much more accurate, especially on weather forecasting, and we also had to implement procedures to steer renewables in a certain way. We had to make first steps to integrate renewables in the market, so we moved from a pure feed-in tariff in Germany to a market premium system where renewable generators can only produce their energy when they find customers. But we also learned that a strong and interconnected European grid is of high importance and that we rapidly had to start to think of the infrastructure of the future. Now, in the region of 50 Hertz, we moved into the third phase with a renewable share above 40%. In fact, in our case, nearly 50%, where renewables are now setting the scene as a dominant source. What is now needed to integrate huge shares of renewables safely, and this becomes increasingly decisive, also cost efficient? And which challenges are we currently facing? Let me give you a short overview on some of these major challenges. Renewables have to be integrated in the market. The more renewables you have in a system, the more it becomes important that they only produce their energy when they found a customer whom they could sell. Therefore, renewable generators in Germany, as I already told you, are now responsible for selling their energies themselves. Another aspect, in the past, we had a system with a few hundred conventional power plants. Now there are in Germany more than 1.7 million decentral installations. I personally cannot imagine how you can run such a system in a regulated or centralized manner. A renewable world, by nature, needs much more market orientation than the former electrical system. And for a well-functioning, and especially also when we want to meet our efficiency targets, for a well-functioning market, demand-side management and other flexibility options become more important. The German government is currently pushing heavily on that and pushing it in the right direction. But one more word on flexibility. There is or was a myth that I heard very often in discussions. People said, you need storage when you go for renewables. You need it directly when you start with renewables. Actually, our experience and all our studies for the future show, in general, that is true, but not before a share of renewables of 70 to 80% in the system. That is, of course, a European view on that. It may be different. It may be different in other parts of the world. Until a share of 70 to 80%, we, in our case, have more than sufficient flexibility in the system. And we do not need storage yet. That will be one of our challenges in 20 to 30 years. But renewables can have, and they will have to take over system responsibility. They have to take a role in keeping the system stable. We integrate the renewables more and more in the ancillary service markets. Voltage control by wind power, for example, is already common today in our region, and that works more than well, I can tell you. Renewables are actually able to stabilize the system when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. We have just 2 weeks ago integrated first renewables in the control power market, which we need to balance the system. This is another consequent step towards a stronger integration of renewables into the market. And I'm still, I can tell you, a bit proud on this success. Renewables have an impact on the market. In an energy-only market, renewables with marginal costs of zero, of course, are lowering the wholesale price, the average wholesale price, and are pushing the conventional generation, when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining, out of the market. The question is how investment decisions under such conditions can be made in the needed complementary conventional power plants. Some countries have established capacity markets, a very complex instrument in my view. Some go for support schemes like on the renewable side, and some, like Germany, go for strategic reserves. I also do not have the clear answer which solution is the right one, but I'm convinced that this question in this transition will follow us the next decades as one of the big challenges that have to be tackled. Besides that, we are intensively working on the commercial and physical integration of the different European regions. We are aiming in Europe to achieve the European single electricity market based on a strong connectivity. And we are already well connected via market coupling schemes between the different market regions, between the different countries. Our neighboring states, for example, can buy pretty cheap sun power on a sunny day like today. The customers in these countries love us for this, whereas the generators of these countries, of course, are not so happy. But we also see some unwanted effects. For example, so-called unplanned loop flows through our neighboring countries, which need to be managed. A strong connectivity between neighboring states is one of the important success factors. That's what we learned. As one big challenge for us, we need a different grid infrastructure. We heard that already this morning in a renewable world. Energy has to be transported from the renewable areas to the consumer centers. Typically, they are not very close to each other. That is our business at 50Hertz, and I can tell you we like it. So, ladies and gentlemen, what makes us confident that we will master the next phase in this transition where renewables are the dominant source in the system? I would like to answer this question by giving you one example. In March last year, March 2015, we experienced a partial solar eclipse in Germany with ramp-ups of 14 gigawatt PV production in 70 minutes. We called that our test for the future. That will be the daily business in 10 to 15 years from now on when we have built even more solar and integrated that in the system. We were quite excited, but finally everything worked well. Why? Because we believed in the market and the market provided us and proved it right. We believed in the new introduced quarterly hour products and price signals by information of the market, and everything worked well. There was enough flexibility in the market, and on top of this, of course, we were also well prepared ourselves. I often get another question: what does the energy transition mean for the market players? Well, renewables are a complete game changer. New business models arise, new players come into the market. Some old business models, on the other hand, disappear. For example, the lignite business. Former huge integrated utilities split or may even disappear from the arena. Some of them will survive and may get even stronger if they are able to adapt to these disruptive changes. At the same time, the transformation offers many opportunities, and I'm sure these opportunities will be grasped by somebody. The transformation offers big opportunities for the industry. But let me make one point very clear. Those evolutions require, in fact, innovative solutions, as we have seen from the schoolboys this morning, and they need entrepreneurship. But on the other hand, we necessarily need an appropriate and stable legal and regulatory framework for the industry. From our perspective, this tandem is essential for a successful transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, let me finally highlight the importance of a collaborative approach to master this transition. Many stakeholders are needed to make it a success. Firstly, we have to cooperate much more intensively amongst transmission, distribution, demand, generation, within the whole industry. Additionally, regional cooperation to get the best out of the geographic diversity is needed if you want to raise efficiently the penetration level of renewables. Thirdly, public acceptance is more important than ever. Nobody can drive energy transition against public opinion. Citizens must be involved in the journey. The energy transition has some consequences, like new grids or wind farms in our neighborhood. Public surveys in Germany and Europe show 80% of the inhabitants in Germany are in favor of the electricity transition in general. It drops to 60% if you ask who is ready to pay an extra fee for it, and it drops to 20% if people have to accept a new line or a windmill in their garden or in their immediate surrounding. It's our task to deal with this dilemma. The players of the industry are more challenged as good communicators and servants of society as ever before. To convince people, we have to be transparent, we have to drive open dialogues, and we have to explain the story behind this transition. This includes also the transparency on the costs of this transition and the cost allocation in the society, one thing which Germany had to learn. Ladies and gentlemen, COP21 in Paris, with the ambitious and inspiring results, is paving the way for a further transition into a decarbonized world. The renewables are a central sustainable solution for reaching this target. 10 to 15 years ago, myself as an engineer, could not imagine integrating safely more than 5% volatile renewables. Today, in our laboratory, as I explained to you, we have shown that 50% are feasible, and we are optimistic that we will manage higher shares as well. I hope that I could provide you with some short insights into our laboratory of this renewable development here in Germany, and that I could share some experience with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the Energiewende considers not only Germany anymore. It has become a worldwide development. Because no one of us has a silver bullet or nor the master plan how to do it best, let's learn from each other. We have to think broader, we have to drive innovation, and we, the industry, we have to grasp the opportunities of this transition. Thank you for listening so patiently. Thank you very much.